Well, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be taking a look at the state of Florida and going over what I think is going to be happening when it comes to the 2024 election. Yesterday, I did this with New Jersey. I'll probably do it with some other states. Yesterday, I concluded that I think Trump's going to lose New Jersey probably by around 9 to 11 points. I'm going to give my potential margin for Florida. And as you can see, it did gain one electoral vote, and I think it's going to gain a lot more in the 2030 census with the influx of people that we're seeing going to Florida, especially the past 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic restrictions in many of the other states. But you can see they do have this state as likely Trump. The first thing to mention about Florida in 2024, this is like the first election cycle where it's not a swing state, so there's not a ton of focus on it. Obviously, when it was a swing state, it was massive with the amount of electoral votes that it did have, but now it's seen as a clear, likely Donald Trump state. I think guaranteed Donald Trump's going to win this state. There have been some closer polls that I'm going to talk about and what I expect the overall margin to be. But remember, going back to 2020, you can see the recent results. Donald Trump winning in 2016 against Hillary. Very close election that year. You had Trump winning by 1.2 points. And then the buildup in 2020 was that this could have been possibly the closest state that, we would have seen in 2020, and it just did not happen. Now it got overshadowed because of what happened with all the other states and the counting and things like that. But one of the big surprises on election night in 2020 was the fact that Donald Trump won Florida by over 3 points. And remember, that's November of 2020. You're only about 7-8 months into the pandemic. That's really before the whole showdown with DeSantis and Newsom and the entire dynamic, which really turned the state conservative. So Trump won the state by almost 3.5 points before the DeSantis Newsom thing, before the influx in terms of the population into the state of Florida. And then you had the 2022 midterms where DeSantis wins by 20 points, Rubio wins by 16 points. Democrats are going to say, well, they knew they were going to lose. They didn't want to invest a lot of money into it. But there's no swing state where one party would win by 20 points in a midterm year. It's just ridiculous. And it just goes to show you, even though DeSantis was an incumbent, that the state clearly is Republican now. And the only question, in my opinion, is what will the margin be when it comes to the 2024 election, because Trump is winning it. If you're winning by 3.2 points, before you gain 1 million people in terms of an advantage with the voter registration, the midterms in 2022, I mean, this is going to be a clear Trump victory. I think everyone knows it. That's why nobody's really talking about Florida. But liberals are starting to kind of tiptoe around it because there's been more positive polls for them recently. Looking at the Real Clear polls, not necessarily a big change here. You do have Trump +6, which I think is relatively fine in terms of the margin. I think Trump's probably going to win the state by around 7.5 points personally. But you can see just the massive shift. This time in 2020, Biden was up by 3 points. At this time in 2020, I'm sure pretty much every liberal thought they were going to win Florida. And now we've got a 9-point shift from October of 2020 to October of 2024 in terms of the polls. Biden +3.2, Hillary was +2.9. This is a clear 9-point shift from 2020 and 2016. And those are polls where Trump both obviously way overperformed. He overperformed these numbers by 6 points. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if Trump won this state by 7.5, 8, maybe 9 points. Honestly, the reason where it might get a little bit murky is because you do have this RMG research, which I believe technically is a Republican pollster that only has Trump up by 2. You've got kind of this liberal bullshit, terrible data polls that have Trump up by 4. And then you've got, I mean, this is, some of the polls that these, this is 538. They've only got Trump up by around 3.5 at this point, which is a lot different than Real Clear Politics, who's got him up a lot more. 538 is a lot more liberal. It is what it is, but they've only got Trump up by 3.8 as compared to 538, who's got him up by 6 points. I certainly think it's way more realistic. I think it's going to even be bigger than a 6-point victory in the state of Florida when you factor in everything. And again, nobody really views this as a swing state, but liberals are desperate. They're trying to find a path. Right now, they have to go to North Carolina. They have to go to Georgia. They have to go to the Rust Belt. It's like they're conceding Arizona. And they're trying to turn states like, oh, maybe Florida. They haven't done it with Ohio because I guess they've conceded Ohio completely. But now they're starting to say, well, maybe Florida can turn based off of everything. I mean, it's just such a Republican avalanche in the state. Trump would have to be, and obviously he's not because Trump won the state in both 2016 and 2020, but it would have to be a Republican candidate that was so unlikable. It was just historic. And that's obviously not the case with Trump, especially when it comes to a state-by-state basis. Florida is a state that Trump won 2 times, and now there's way better numbers in Florida for a Republican victory. And again, Trump's won the state both times. He's ran for president. So all of that combined, I think you're looking at, and I think I'm being conservative by saying, no pun intended, I'm conservative by saying it's around a 7.5 point victory for Trump. I would say around a 7.5 point win. You can see this is Polymarket. So Polymarket does have Trump around an 84% chance to win the state. I mean, obviously, if you wanted to bet this, you would win. But it's like, I'm sure with Polymarket, there's probably caps. And also, it's like, what's the point? 85% chance. That's not great odds to bet it, even though I think it's a lock that he wins the state. At a certain point, like in March and looks like May, June, he was around a 93% chance. It's gone down a little bit. I'm surprised based off of that RMG research poll, it hasn't gone back down a little bit, because that is kind of a big poll for Trump to only be leading by 2. You would have figured that would be more, but it doesn't look like it's really affected the overall odds very much. He's at an 84% chance, and he's kind of been there for the past month and a half. It really hasn't changed in terms of the overall odds here. So certainly, you're very happy at this point if you're a Republican that Florida is not a swing state. With Florida and Ohio being in Trump control, the map is so much more different. There's way more paths for Trump. And I certainly think this state, they're trying to say, well, the recent polls, there's a Republican poll that has Trump only up by 2. It's going to be close. I think this is going to be a state that Trump wins by around 7.5 very easily. 1.2 to 3.3 in 2020 to the massive influx of Republican voters recently the past 3 years. And I certainly think it's going to be a clear Republican state moving forward. You're looking at, I think like a disappointing win for Trump would be like 4.5, 5 points. I think that'd be kind of disappointing. Not anything terrible. I mean, you'll take it for sure based on where we were in 2020 and 2016. At this time in 2020, every liberal thought Biden was going to win the state. So the fact that we're here and it's shifted that much is certainly good. But I would kind of be hoping for around a 6-7 point victory in the state of Florida. Not that it matters a ton. You want to win it, obviously. That's the most important thing. But we certainly expect Trump to win it. Pretty much all the polls reflect a solid lead for Trump that very likely will be around a 6 or a 7 point victory. And you can see Florida is gaining electoral votes. It is gaining more electoral power, and that's only going to continue. We have to wait till the 2030 census, but I'm sure once that happens, you're going to see probably 3 or 4 more electoral votes get added to it. We still got like half the decade left, but still, this is a state that Trump's going to win, and they are getting more in terms of population, and it could also help Trump in terms of the popular vote, winning the state by 7 or 8 points with a bigger population. Also, another thing I'll mention, this is the Florida Senate race. I think pretty much everyone expects Rick Scott to win. He has been leading. There's a few polls that have been close. They're trying to flip it. The liberals are up against it when it comes to the math in the Senate, so they're looking at every state possible. They're looking at Florida. Obviously, it looks like now they're going to lose Montana. They're probably going to lose Ohio, although you could argue it's 50-50. But they're looking at like Florida and some of these other states. So when it comes to Florida, I think Rick Scott for sure is going to win it. And that would be my take when it comes to the Senate. Also, I think there was, let me look at the 2022 results in Florida. And these were the results in 2022. You can see Rubio by 16, Tampa Republican, a lot of the surrounding suburbs getting really conservative, a lot of Latinos in Florida now conservative, which has also swung the state. DeSantis 59-39, basically winning the state by 20 points. Just total blowouts. And again, I would say Trump by around 6.5, 7.5, maybe 8 points in the state of Florida. That would be my prediction at this point. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.